respective thematic session. So please note, we are all coming back to close together. Thank you. So for green financing, please, can we rise? Can we rise? Green financing, please rise. On your way out, there is somebody there to direct you to your thematic session. Please, let's make it brisk. As the green financing team are moving, please, you are with the public-private partnership and how sustainable and sustainability can be incorporated into the infrastructure of PPP projects. Yes. Can we rise and proceed? Thank you. Let's move. Thank you. Local rating tools. Are we ready? Local rating tools, the framework, and how we will develop it for the Nigerian context. Are we together? Please, can we rise? Yes, thank you. I believe we are going to be having the lesson from abroad right about here. So we can stand up and just come closer together. All right, thank you.
Lessons from abroad. As you all know, the standards we're trying to localize are generally based from experiences of people in other climes that have developed and implemented standards. Leeds is not ours. Edge is new. It's evolving. There's BRAIM, there's Estidama. There are so many. So the idea is we have some distinguished speakers, some on ground, some that will join us via Zoom, to give us a perspective on their experiences implementing and developing standards in different climes. So we have Mr. Clinton. If I murder somebody's name, they will pardon me, please. Mr. Clinton Bavubwa. He's a professor of sustainable human development in the Department of Construction Management and Quantity Survey, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. He's a full professor of sustainable human development in the Department of Construction Management and Quantity Surveying. with a multidisciplinary research focus on the built environment. Before entering academia, he was involved as a quantity surveyor on several infrastructure projects, both in Nigeria and South Africa. He holds a PhD in engineering management and has published over 500 research papers in his area of interest. He has extensive knowledge in practice, research, and training and teaching. He is currently the Vice Dean, Postgraduate Studies, Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment, and the Head of Sustainable Human Settlement and Construction, and the Construction Research Center, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. He's also an author of 5 scholarly research books that were published with Springer Nature and CRC Press. So while we're setting him up, I'll also talk about the site section for the other speakers. Here with us, we have architect Anthony Okoye. He's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architects, member of RIBA, and is a lead architect professional. He's a seasoned architect, urban planner, with experience spanning Africa, Europe, and North America. So when this is done, I'll read his full citation. So we should all know that we have people all over the world that have participated in what we are doing right now. So we have a deep pool, a rich pool of people. At this stage, we are doing advocacy. At the point, we'll start doing measurement and actual crafting our standards to align with our own context. LEED is foreign, but the principles are universal, they are global. So this is how we would keep the discussion going, keep the engagements getting deeper to get to where we are. So I think at this point, I would now call on Professor Clinton. Please pardon the delay. So we'll also be having, as part of our panelists, Ms. Tessa Brunette from Arup, London. She's an architect and a building envelope designer who leads the Arup Building Group in Cape Town, South Africa. She specializes in integrated design solutions that are grounded on sustainable principles to deliver value. She works in collaboration with the design team and clients to quickly identify and develop design solutions that are pragmatic, cost-effective, and support the architectural intent. Excuse me. Let's hope we've gotten it right this time. So, Professor Clinton, you may share your screen and start your presentation, if technology will allow.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you please share your screen?
Okay.
So after he's done, we'll take a few questions, then we'll go to the next panelist.
I think I'm just going to share briefly, considering that
Yeah.
once again, thank you very much for inviting me. Considering that the particular session is looking at sustainable and smart infrastructure development legislation abroad in our case study. What I talked about during the course of preparing the particular meeting is the dimension standards. And I kind of really try to explore the whole idea of smart infrastructure, smart cities. And one thing you will keep finding is the fact that smart cities utilizes sustainable smart infrastructure in order to actually be able to enhance the quality of life. And once you enhance the quality of life, you are able to hold the very good and take care of the protect our environment. So, whereas at this particular point here, they are actually also leveraging on the dimension of digital technologies, big data, IoT, and the other aspects, which kind of considering there the whole idea of smart infrastructure and smart cities as it's basically the whole narrative is to see how to kind of bring the whole manage our urban services. For instance, how to manage our infrastructure, basic transportation, water supply, waste management, energy, in a sustainable and efficient way. So if you look at this particular part here, you will like that when you are looking at smart cities, or you are basically kind of talking about smart infrastructure for your cities to be smart, it needs to basically be very of infrastructure working together, actually making the life of people become better. So smart, everybody sustainable smart infrastructure or smart city. You realize that the whole idea of the sustainable smart infrastructure is that you also have a backbone of the smart city. So if you don't have infrastructure, you don't need a backbone of the smart city. So I believe that it is kind of really responsible for us in terms of to understand in terms of how we go about this whole concept of smart city, how we monitor it, how we manage it, and much more. What is the optimizing city function? So one of the areas that I have seen within the whole narrative of the discussion of smart cities or smart infrastructure conception that we are not really focused on standards. So I will going to speak today about standards for sustainable smart infrastructure or smart cities development because it will implement this particular dimension of standards. You realize that we don't have a backbone for us to kind of be able to speak to. So I believe there is a need for smart infrastructure, there is a need for smart city, but much more we need to kind of look at that. These are statistics that we know very well in terms of organization, how cities is growing very rapidly, everybody is 5/7, kind of really emphasizes integrated plan, integrated management, citizen participation, which is paramount, because it should not be a top-down approach, it should be a bottom-up process, where the citizens participate, they are actually able to contribute to business efficiency, and then we are going to create resilience against what we kind of call climate change at the moment. The other one that will also develop this is the smart city framework standard ES 181. If you look at the ES, which is popularly referred to, we kind of publicly available last years. 181 is kind of against part of the British standards, which offer guidance. So, as we grow, looking at the dimension of Nigeria and other countries in Africa, we need to look at various concepts in terms of and then we look at the technical standards, should also be looked at, which to me, my view, not the ISO and INEC and all that, but relating to the smart city and ICT reference framework. We need to develop these things for our cities. They are very interesting, they are very good for them. How do we customize them for Nigeria? How do we customize them for Africa, for Botswana, and other African countries? Just briefly, you want to know the ISO 27110, which is kind of something that we need to kind of really look at, talk about sustainable development communities. You look at the data, it's kind of really important, but you want to kind of achieve that. It's like all we have to be consensus on sustainable development. That the sustainability is not an ingredient of this. We need to improve on them. And we cannot evolve across sectors, nothing is kind of life cycle and then fantastic. So this is a very good standard that we can kind of really evolve and see kind of all of this to happen. Then please one to one said that we should be involving, kind of really tells us how we need to kind of evolve this aspect of creating standard for us. And here, it talks about the plan to check, the EDCA, because we don't like the ethics, we need to implement, we check, we need to monitor that right there, we need to take action. Which is kind of what we need to do. It's not just talking about, we need an approach. That's the kind of what the EDCA is talking about. However, you realize that what I'm saying that it should not be a one-size-fits-all. It can be the combination of the EDC and the ISO 1, the 3101, and you put together, you actually need to get a more sustainable and smart city. But it's not just going to come by adopting each of the standards individually. You need to put them together and they are able to achieve something very good. The other one that I'm going to get to my half, which we can actually be able to walk around the way to ISO 27120, that talks about the city communities. They have sustainable communities. And sustainable cities and communities, very good at the indicators of city services and then quality of life. My take home is that I want to say that standards are very important. Standards form the foundation for sustainable smart cities. And they ensure that the integration of different technology systems actually work in harmony. Secondly, we need to also look at inclusivity and sustainability. Standards for sustainable smart cities basically should aim for inclusivity. Nobody should be and stability. So that all the citizens can benefit from this particular way that we are in. And lastly, on the take home, we're also talking about the sustainability and efficiency. Because sustainable smart cities is not just about using advanced technology, which is what the revolution and all that, but it's about using technology to drive efficiency, to reduce your impact. Then we're going to look at the harms the lack of
very sure we all found that talk rich. So just what we'll do right now is, once again, thank you very much, Professor Clinton, for that fantastic talk. So we'll go through all the sessions. So if you have questions, just put them down. They are our panelists, so they may not be here, but they will be on the call throughout. So once we are done with having their presentations, they will still be here, so you collect your questions and then you can ask them. Then they will chip in and try and give a perspective on where as answers to that question. So we now have from Arup, London, Ms. Tessa. She will present, after which we'll have architect Anthony Okoye.
Hi, thank you. Can you see me?
Yes, clearly.
Great. Just give me 5 seconds while I share my screen, please. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see you.
Great, okay, thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. It's a very interesting and important topic, so I'm looking forward to discussing this with you, sharing my thoughts on it, and then having some stimulating questions to follow up afterwards, together with the other panelists. So by introduction, I'm Tessa Brunet. I work at our South African by context and birth, and recently relocated to London to take up a regional role, looking after sustainability across Africa, India, and the Middle East. So the question today, that I was briefed in terms of what we're seeking to answer, is how do you achieve prosperous, resilient, socially inclusive, equitable, environmentally sustainable, and culturally vibrant built environment, which is quite a lot. That is an important vision to have for the future, and it's certainly something that is contained within the African Manifesto that has been prepared by the World Rebuilding Council, which is, I believe, one of the topics of conversation today. So in answering that, I was asked to look at meaning that the ability to naturally ventilate the building is extended to 82% of the year, which it drives down the energy demand of the building significantly. In addition to that, we've incorporated measures around water harvesting to do things like flush the toilets, and so we've actually replaced 50% of the non-potable water usage through grey water and rainwater harvesting. There's a significant annual carbon saving that we're able to leverage through that natural ventilation strategy that I mentioned, and we've also locked in 5.5 tons of single-use plastic into the building structure in lieu of conventional polystyrene options. So the building itself is framed around this central atrium, which allows that really wonderful airflow and facilitates natural ventilation, but also provides a really good human connection between the people in the different floors and how they occupy the building. There's timber in the facade, so you can see on the inside here, that's actually cross-laminated timber, which is the first use of CLT at scale on the continent in a commercial application. So that was really exciting and a huge industry development piece that we were fortunate to drive in Cape Town. And then that's the timber from the outside. It's a different piece of timber that you look at on the outside, just for any any architects in the room. It's cladding on the outside and then the timber on the inside. So there is a weather line separation between the two, but this really does facilitate significant carbon reduction, as well as all the benefits that you have from a well insulated envelope, and of course the feeling that you have from interfacing with timber. It's a very nice material on a human level. Then I'm going to talk about a project that we finished very recently in Rwanda, which is the Rwandan Institute for Conservation Agriculture. And this is a nice example of work in a rural area where taking, again, a very first principles approach, but using same but different principles has led to a very rich outcome that is completely contextually appropriate and very interesting. So here, the key outcomes were societal. So the two key things that the reason for the project's being was around addressing food security as well as creating employment. So from a food security perspective, this is in a rural area. It was around education. It was around enabling people to understand more about agricultural techniques that actually are around regenerating landscapes and creating sustainable livelihoods. So there's a whole program around scholarships and as well as community outreach to enable that. Alongside that very long-term food security outcome, there's also the employment piece. A lot of that had to do with the construction phase. So there were 900 jobs created during the construction phase, with 90% of them from the local area. Alongside that, there was training. So very, very conscious focus on the laborers who were working on site being trained through that process. So those principles were completely embodied into the design and informed material selection and design techniques that were used in that building design. So the design outcomes that were able to be leveraged from that, aside from the societal outcomes, which I've discussed already, from a building design perspective and how this building sits within its context, there's significantly reduced embodied as well as operational carbon. There's renewable off-grid power and also water supply. Sustainable drainage solutions, which are very tied in with the nature-based solutions, and also a complete wastewater and recycled effluent. And this is part of that institute today. And so you can see some of the initiatives here. I don't know if you could pick it up, but there are rammed earth walls as well as hand pressed brick clay blocks that using clay from site and that are unfired. So it's really using very local materials, and also the fact that it's all done by hand means that the people in the area have jobs and they're able to kind of learn these really important and sustainable and transferable skills onto other projects. There's always a project that I like to reflect on. I don't think we can be talking about kind of sustainable design in an African context and arguably global context without referring back to Eastgate in Harare, which was completed in 1997. But just touching briefly on that, the principles of that design were around leveraging thermal mass. So there's always this analogy of how the building is an anthill. And so in essence, because it's very close to the earth, when it's hot outside, it's cool inside. And when it's cool outside, it remains warm inside the anthill. And that principle has been carried across to this building very, very broadly. So the one thing that I really enjoy about this building and why I'm talking about it today is from a resilience perspective. I was last in this building late last year in Harare, and it was probably 28 degrees outside, maybe approaching 30 degrees outside. And for cost and electrical supply reasons, the fans that are required to help the airflow through the building, maybe I should show a section again. there are three of these big fans that go from the basement and come up into the central atrium. They aid the airflow. So in essence, it's helping the stack effect, but it also helps that airflow through the building. These fans, because of the unreliable electrical supply, but also the cost associated with the electrical draw on those fans, meant that they were turned off. But even with those fans turned off, and it was 30-ish degrees outside, it was very cool inside this building. Cool inside the atrium, which makes sense because there's more air in that space, so it would be cooler, but equally within the office spaces that sit alongside that. So this always makes me reflect that in 2023, we really do need to be learning from the buildings that have gone and the buildings that have been built and continue to work. So the last example is looking at a city scale. So this is a master planning scheme that we're working on in Oman. It's quite a large site, 790 hectares, and also a significant number of people who live there. The particular message around this master plan is around quantifying costs and benefits in terms of value, cost, and carbon, and understanding the balance between those. So the key aspect of this project is that we were involved right from the beginning, and we were able to work alongside the client to make some strategic moves during the project creation phase, like as the project was being imagined, and secondly, during the early design phase, so during concept phase, as the project imagination was being clarified into an actual design. And there, it was about having clarity of purpose. So understanding very clearly what the intention, what the outcome, what good looked like for this project, and understanding that across the stages and continuing with a very clear purpose throughout the process. So quite an important takeaway, just on to zoom through this, is that you can see here in terms of the capital cost, there is significantly higher cost in the public amenities that allow people to move around, which in an Omani context is very specific to that site and very relevant for that context. Equally, sites in Lagos will have similar challenges. Lagos and wider Nigeria will have similar challenges around the transport and ability of people to move. So you can see here more money was spent on the roads, transports, and bridges, but less money was spent in other places in order to achieve the outcomes. What that also meant is that because there was more money spent in these areas that really needed the investment, and so more money than normal was spent in order to achieve the outcome, what that meant was that there was significantly less utility costs over the lifespan of this, the 20-year time frame. I mean, obviously, a project like this has a much longer lifespan, but in order to quantify capture the costs and quantify that when considering a 20-year lifespan. So significantly lower. And so this means that it really comes down to value. You know, the value of that site became hugely impactful. Then also looking at the capital carbon, because as soon as we start unpacking all of this, you know, the carbon aspect becomes really important as well. So again, what we see here is that there was more carbon spent in the public aspects, but down with that, the 43% lower capital cost in terms of the operational and user costs. And it was lower capital carbon across the project on the other areas. So the outcomes that led to was around the maximizing the value while minimizing cost and carbon. And the key lesson there is really about early stage involvement alongside a clear purpose. And a key outcome is that the site value was several times greater than would have been achieved using a business as usual approach. And that is largely because of the density that was promoted through that design. So making sure that buildings were closer and people were living in denser, more urban environments, and then how the money was spent and being very careful and thoughtful around that. So after that whiz through the case studies, I want to answer the question that I asked at the beginning: how do we achieve this future? And I would make the provocation that as designers, most of us I think are designers around this virtual table. That's our job, right? That's why we come to work every day. That's what we do. So we should make sure that we do that, and we need to hold ourselves to account to do that. And what is our job? We solve complex problems in creative ways. That's that's it, right? But we always need to understand the challenge and to be very, very clear around what the framing is of that challenge. And also understanding that we're not going to be able to solve every one of those things on every single project. What we need to do is our absolute best on every single project and make sure that we are very conscious of what we are and what we perhaps aren't focusing on. So a few takeaways is I think we need to be learning from the past. So we absolutely need to be understanding what's gone before and what's worked, and let's learn from that so that we don't make the same mistakes. And we have to start from the basics as well, like where does the sun shine from, how does air flow. Those are really important basics. We also need to be brave, so we really do need to try to do things that can push a boundary, but perhaps there's a bit of resistance because it's the first time, or it's an unusual thing to do, or we do need to be brave. The changes that are required and the urgency around that means that things need to happen, and they must happen quickly, and it's in each of our gifts to be doing that. We need to be strategic early on. So the earlier we can make important decisions, the more impactful that those decisions will be, the more impactful our contribution to a project will be. We also need to design with purpose. So we must have a very clear idea about where we are going to and how we're going to get there, and carry that through on all of our projects. And finally, we must design for the future now. Now's the time. Now's the time. It's these young folk who are going to be living in all of the places that we design and we build, and we owe it to them to be doing the absolute best that we can do to achieve this vision for the future. Thank you. That's me.
So once again, thank you very much. Ms. Tessa, so that was very hands-on. We went from academia and standards to some very direct first principles case studies. Thank you very much once again. So now we'll call on the only panelist that is physical. Yes, so I'll just complete his citation since he's here with us. He's a distinguished alumnus of the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science and Master's degree in Architecture in 87 and 89, respectively. In 1995, he moved to Edinburgh College of Arts, Scotland, to study urban planning, where he graduated with a distinction and a top of class to obtain a master's degree in urban design. Presently, the managing partner of Design General Limited, Architect Okoye practiced architecture and urban planning with firms in the US, UK, and Nigeria in various capacities. The firms include Wallace Roberts and Todd, LLC USA, Sir Frank Myers Associates, Edinburgh, Scotland, Design Group Nigeria, and Godwin Hope, Wood and Kuye. He is a recipient of AIA President Award for Design of a Green Community Off the Grid. He wrote a publication on green design in the Venture Career Journal in 2012. He worked with the German Agency for International Cooperation and the Nigerian Energy Support Program to develop guidelines for energy efficiency in buildings in Nigeria for the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing. Anthony has been an external juror to Drexel University, Philadelphia Urban Design and Architecture Studio from 2002 to 2008. He has designed LEED certified projects in the US, Jersey City, and Long Branch, New Jersey. Has also designed the National Information Technology Center, Abuja, Education Center, Esikwato, Abia, all with environmentally sustainable features. He also recently completed the Entrepreneurs Organization Master's Program at MIT Edincourt House, Boston, USA. Architect Tony, as he's fondly called, is a recipient of several awards including the Andrew Grant Prize RIBA USA Award for Off-Grid Sustainable Settlements, AIA President Award for Design, RIBA Award for Design of Sittingbourne Town Extension, and the British Chevening Scholarship 95 to 97. It is worthy to mention that Anthony's firm, Design General Limited, sponsors an annual design competition amongst university students in Nigeria. Architects, distinguished panelists in the house, Architect Tony, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to quickly run through. I'll just go straight to the point. There'll be so many, to decide on what to present, there are several examples, but I chose this one in particular because of the panelists he had. So to some degree, it has been peer reviewed. You know, when you do your work privately in your office, nobody is you and your client and all that, but this was peer reviewed by some panelists, which you're going to see as I present. So the project really is to, I decided to go in depth with this particular project instead of several examples, just to show the process and some of the principles that we applied. So the brief essentially was to give something back to the environment and to create healthy, vibrant, non-toxic development respectful of nature and natural resources. And it was organized by the RIBA USA. The community must be, the whole idea was the developments must be off-grid, requiring no power from the municipal, treat his own water waste and his own waste, and alternative energy sources, obviously. So our premise was that sustainable community should start to reverse environmental damage and not add to it. So the site is in Philadelphia. There's this place in Philadelphia called the Forgotten Bottom. What's the name? It was called the Forgotten Bottom because it's actually forgotten. Because it was cut off by, in the 60s, 70s, all these modernist development, freeways, railways, so they just cut it off. And it was almost like a wasteland where wastewater, black water, the runoff from the city emptied there. And it had some tank farms for petroleum and all that. So it was really derelict, you know. So we chose it because we wanted to revitalize it. The firm I worked for, Wallace Roberts and Todd, incidentally, the master planners for Abuja, and they did that in 1976, 77, when Obasanjo was president. So they've done several projects, and they do a lot of revitalization projects. So this was one of those we looked into. We've done for Jersey City, for several projects in the States. So so that's the Forgotten Bottom. There's so many things I could say about it, but so the judges for this particular project included Tom Main of Morphosis, Ken Yang of, you know, just very known, those in architecture, they know some of those names. Then the AIA president at that time, and the RIBA president at that time, so they were quite distinguished. So the process we undertook was very interactive. So first, understanding the problem and scale was very crucial in some of these projects. So there has to be a lot of research to various aspects, especially when we're intervening in the urban environment. So we had different people researching, and how do you know what people are doing? We had seminars every week, every other day. So you present what you've researched on, so the knowledge is shared. So it guides your thinking, because you can't research everything. So we came together to
share our research. And so we, of course, establishing the goals for the project. And then analysis of the site was crucial. Various people researching in different areas, sociologists, economists, architects, structural engineers, each one delving into the site to understand the opportunities and the constraints the site presents. So the design process was also very interactive. The professionals came in all early, from the survey to the conceptual development. So that way, it wasn't a linear process at all. And we evaluated the proposals and did a workshop with the community, which we did along the line of the development of the project. Then evaluation, implementation, and of course feedback. So the principles that we adopted, how do you organize a city? Because we've talked about providing technology, we've talked about providing efficient power supply and all that. But how is a city organized? So it brings us to urban structure. What is a sustainable urban structure? If you don't organize a city and is efficient, then you're going to waste a lot of energy trying to solve problems. So understanding, there's a lot of literature on urban structure. So some of the current thinking from the new urbanism movement, the ecological design group, and then the transit-oriented development group are some of the most current thinking on it. They're quite varied, a lot of ideas, but it's good to understand how a sustainable city is organized. So the particular ones of interest we looked at was transit-oriented development. The name speaks for itself. Then traditional neighborhood development, and then ecological design. I'll just mention the traditional one, which might be, for them, they looked at European city, an American city, and analyze it. What are the peculiarities? Then, but for us, you can look at the Nigerian city. If you look at Kano, some of our urban cities, places like, if you look at the old, if you look at some of the Ife in the towns, there are certain qualities they had. If you look at Kano and all that. So for us, you can begin to look at our cities. One of the things to learn, because these days we talk of pedestrian-oriented development. Those cities were purely pedestrian. So what qualities make them, pedestrian? The block sizes. They didn't have to, so the elements and qualities that made them those things is one of those things that the traditional neighborhood design tends to adopt and implement. Then, so the consideration starts from a regional level, then down to the building. And the last presenter from Arop has actually shown examples of case studies on those scales. So the building is where most of us operate. We seem to understand that, but this diagram I'm showing shows that your actions, even at the individual level, is part of has global impact. So the scale goes up. So our actions, even though they are within the building, it's part of a bigger global, it has ripples globally. So, but for the regional scale, you are looking at urban group boundaries. In the UK, for instance, you have the Green Belt, which restricts urban development to minimize sprawl. So nobody can go beyond a certain road boundary, except all the infill sites and brownfield sites are completed. You can't develop outside it. So it minimizes sprawl. And so that makes for higher density, more efficient use of infrastructure. In our context, the traditional cities like Kano and Co, they had the Kano walls. Most of those traditional towns had boundaries, which limited development within those areas. Then also the polycentric structure. If you look at cities, a monocenter is very inefficient. So the tendency is to have polycenters. So you have different centers. Even where you don't plan it, they evolve that way. For instance, Lagos, we all know examples of how Adeniro Gusanya became a center, how Allen Avenue and all that evolved naturally. I'll talk a bit about that later. Then, of course, transit accessibility is very crucial, hydrology. Then we come to the neighborhood scale and district level. So looking at pedestrian, a size that is no more than 500 to 1,000 diameter radius, because it allows you a 5-minute walk, 5 to 10 minutes walk from anywhere within the development. Mixture of uses, density, clearly defined center and parts. Of course, those terms are from Kevin Lynch in his books, Making Sense of the City. They need to have nodes, landmarks, edges, and all that. Permeability, very important. Being able to move around easily without restrictions. Variety of income types, compact form, mass transit accessibility, urban management, and environmental considerations. Then we come to the block, the urban block. The urban block is, the perimeter block is crucial for the development of the city. The perimeter block has an outward public space and an inward private space. And it helps to define the public urban space. So it makes the city or the streets public spaces, social spaces, where there's interaction. If you look at places like Ebute and some of our older cities, you find that people use these spaces for social activities. It's almost like an outdoor room. So, but some of the development now we've lost that quality of cities. Then density, medium to high density. The block should not be too deep to allow cross ventilation and all that. It has to also be flexible enough to accommodate changing uses over time. So you don't have to demolish it, but it has the quality to be adaptable. Then, of course, for buildings, green architecture. We all know that, with all the things about green architecture that we've spoken about, so I'll just leave that. So the project I'm going to discuss now we call it the urban kidney. The kidney, not because of the shape or for visual imagery, but for the function. So we tend to adopt those references to nature from a functional perspective. How the kidney absorbs the dirt, the waste in the body, and then generates clean blood to the system. So look at the site now. This is Forgotten Bottom, some images of the site, showing that it's really very derelict. Then this is the diagram of the kidney, just a conceptual image of our intent. So you have the runoff from the streets, you have the black water, you have the wastewater all flowing and into the river. So that process, it passes through wetlands, riparian edges, detention ponds, and then it's cleaned before going into the sea. So the natural cleansing occurs. So the concepts we adopted, extending the green of the Skokie River. The Skokie River is famous in Philadelphia. It has a natural part, very green and lovely place. So we are extending it to the site. Then the other concept is connecting Forgotten Bottom through pathways to the rest of the city and across the Schuylkill. Then with visual connection from the site to the city. Then this organizing system that we adopted, transportation, a lot has been said about transportation, so I'll just leave that. Then energy. What we did about energy is pretty interesting. We looked for a menu of energy types, sustainable energy types we're going to use. So we looked at geothermal, solar panels, wind turbines, each of them contributing a certain amount to the overall energy requirement. The solar panels was limited because of the area of the roof. We couldn't go beyond that. So that was fixed. Then geothermal added. By the time we did the wind turbines, we were able to get enough energy for the site. The other organizing element we adopted was the water. From detention ponds to wetlands to so those are the things that slowed runoff, allowed water to discharge slowly into the Schuylkill River. The last element we used was ecology. So the riparian edges were developed, and then the other thing too was the land uses and open space structure. The implementation strategy is also very important. What we did was we started from the forgotten bottom site, make sure it had enough critical mass for it to be self-sustaining. So that's the phase one. While that is going on, we planted switchgrass. Switchgrass has the ability to transform organic waste like petroleum to harmless uses over a 7-year period. So we had an urban farm. So as we are retrofitting the forgotten bottom, the healing of the site was taking place. So you can see how the phases went. I won't go into detail with all that. Then this is the conceptual sketch of the sections, showing the green roof, solar panels, and the rest. So this is the plan that captured the whole thing, showing that our intervention went beyond the site, to knit our development to the city. And then so that's essentially example. So this was showing how we were able to bring a part of the city that's been neglected, or brought it back into prime use, making a positive contribution to the environment. So there are many challenges. For us in Nigeria, for instance, if you look at some of our places that require urban renewal, understanding, there's a need to understand the potentials of the site. And instead of designing places that are just for poor people, having mixed tenure, people that are both rich and poor can cohabit. So when, instead of gentrification taking place, a certain percentage of the new build could be for poor people. And that's what we did in most of our projects in the US, so that the developer must cater for 30% of poor people, maybe through rental. So because of our time, I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I think we deserve another round of applause. Yeah, maybe we should have had this session in the beginning so we would have all the time we need, since the talks are rich. So we still have one more speaker queued up, so we'll just try and expedite whatever we'll do after she talks. Then we take a few questions and then bring the talk to an end. So we would look for avenues to share the slides. I saw people taking pictures from the screen, so we'll try and share the slides and create a platform for questions and answers beyond today and this space. So, Shegun. Okay. So our next speaker is Dr. Nihal. Dr. Nihal is the founder and director of Environas. She is an environmental expert who taught and practiced architecture and urban design for over 15 years in a number of institutions and consultancies in both Cairo and Dubai. She holds a PhD from the AA School of Architecture in London, an MSc in Sustainable Design of the Built Environment. Her Environmental Global Act started in 2012 to spread awareness about the carbon footprint through Sustainable Summer School in the BREED. In 2020, she founded the design lab Environas in Cairo that aims to improve the environmental impact through research-based designs. Dr. Nihal's publication focuses on urban environmental assessments, thermal comfort to improving walkability and passive cooling for the outdoor environment. We're very grateful to have you here. Dr. Niha, you have the floor. Thank you. We can't hear her.
Hello? We can hear you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here today. I'll start sharing my screen. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Nihal. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. And today I will discuss one of the projects that I have developed at Environas. Environas is a research-based design lab, and it's a startup, so we're very ambitious with the goals that we want to achieve. In order to be able to apply that, we integrate environmental design with environmental assessment and research, which is more or less the nature of many of the projects that has been presented today. Our interior landscape architecture and urban design focuses on assessment, whether microclimatic, whether thermal comfort, and we extract a lot of researches, as well as we focus on the insights that are there in the local markets and international markets as well. So before I start, I would like to identify how we look into the environmental challenges that we try to provide environmental solutions for. The relation between the climate, the built environment, and the users is a continuous looping that is continuously causing adverse effects, and we are trying to find solutions for. And as an architect and a design-based firm, we always look into the early stage projects. So the earlier we are able to intervene, the more effect we're able to apply throughout the life cycle of the project, whether it's even after the operation or even after the demolition of the project. In order to be able to do that with all the goals that we discussed today and the acts that we are supposed to take, a very important part is the data that are there. So when we start our design process, whether on a user base or on the building scale, whether on an emission scenario, we realize that it's not only the lack of data that we find, but it's how we bridge these variables that we find, we extract from the data in order to be able to provide proper solutions that would not be able to go into the trial and error phase. So learning from the previous examples or former examples, vernacular architecture, and be able to apply that into conventional designs or the projects that we currently apply, and can that benefit us in our next stage project. So leveraging on that would be able to accelerate our steps in terms of providing environmental solutions. Having said that, we do provide our own digital tools. So sometimes we do have to provide those digital tools to be able to extract weather data files and provide the bridging between the climatic variables and the microclimatic variables, as well as how to identify the influence on the local users. So I think today we're trying to provide international case studies or case studies from abroad to be able to apply it in the country, in Nigeria. So, which requires a lot of bridging between those interpretations of data. And this is one of the very interesting insights that we do focus on. How do we learn from case studies and how do we apply them in local so we always think of how to design green buildings to be able to absorb global heat waves. The reason why we focus on heat waves today, or in this particular presentation, is that when we look at the consequences of the climate change, we try to classify these consequences into how they affect the built environment and the users as well. And having said that, we try to look into how can we absorb these effects, respond to them, perhaps enhance or improve, whether it's following a green guideline, a local green guideline, whether it's following passive strategies or conventional ways, according to the different standards that has been provided. And I think intensive heat waves have been recently felt in different countries across the world. So the past weeks have been facing a lot of heat rise effects in many cities, as we can see. And that puts us into, again, response or identifying the strategies to be able to design with these consequences. So when we say heat rise temperatures versus heat wave frequencies, heat rise temperatures as an environmental consultant is something that we do consider. So even considering these green strategies is part of what we adopt, yet heat waves frequencies is kind of tricky because they do hit our buildings and they do hit our cities and residents heavily. And sometimes even green buildings are not designed to be able to respond to the heat waves that happen or occur. Having said that, we tie it a lot with the notion of climate resilience. And we do develop a toolkit. We're trying to develop a toolkit internally where we look into how can we provide this climate resilience built environment, whether it's assessment, preparedness, response, and then recovery. Because each and every event that happens, our cities and our buildings, our projects takes a lot of time to be able to recover from that particular consequence, and accordingly we do develop our guidelines accordingly, and then we go into different directions. So we believe in looking into the assessment, the early assessment phase, which is very important, and being able to be prepared with that so that we can respond to these adverse effects properly. So today I will be highlighting the responsive behavior of the users and the built environments as well. I will try to rush into that. Having said that, we provide, the publications that I work on encourages walkability and active mobility modes. Because most of our cities, I forgot to mention that Environas is located in Egypt and in Cairo, as well as Nigeria. I think most of our cities are used to the notion of depending on active mobility modes, regardless of the transportation sector and how green it is and the amount of emissions that's rising from there. But a lot of projects that we have been involved in that focuses on this micro-mobility part, as well as the part of green buildings. So why do we highlight that? Is that we see a lot of relation, or it's of course related, not only in terms of a upper scale or a global scale, but even in terms of an action in what we provide with environmental solutions, how the active mobility and green buildings should provide comfort to the users. So this is a framework where from the case studies that we work in on the projects, we are trying to extract data assets, whether it's through measurements, whether it's through databases extractions that we use for simulations, and that is to provide an assessment services, which sometimes is not required in local environments where green buildings is not evident, let's say, or the clients are not still sure that they want to have a green building certifications, because we provide that at a very early design stage. And then be able to provide integrated solutions, and these integrated solutions would provide this integration between people being able to move out in the city or coming from an outdoor environment into the building, and this building depends on the typology of the building as well as the energy demands that's put and the requirements and so on, the standards of the building itself. As I mentioned, so it's a continuous interaction between the indoor and the outdoor. So regardless of if it's a building that we're working on or an outdoor environment, we always do consider not only the effect of the outdoor on the indoor, but it's this dynamic interaction that users are coming, whether from public transport into the building or coming out of their offices into that particular public transport system. This is a very small example to one of the tools that we use, and we were able to publish a research out of that assesses the microclimate of a particular urban area. This particular urban area provides different microclimatic conditions between greening and then these solutions that we try to provide, whether our consultancy or other consultancies as well. It's urban greening, cooling pockets, shade outside the building. We try to look into that into a dynamic way. So how do users perceive these environments as they move between the different temperature variations, and how does it affect their thermal comfort? Because sometimes we move into a lot of outdoor greening or air conditioning, which is sometimes not really required because the users do not spend much time in these particular spaces. That helps a lot with the notion that of operational carbon when we're able to provide that. When we're able to provide or report on the operational carbon, we provide this continuous dynamic interaction for the users. I'll try to move a little bit faster. Having said that, this is a very small example to how we extract the thermal comfort variables between the indoor, where people are in static air-conditioned building, if they're passive design, and how does this affect their journey when they move from one building to another, and it also affects their whole perception of that particular building. We look into that, into how to design an urban block, as mentioned. So this particular urban block, you would see that users coming from different backgrounds, different demographics as well, they would perceive these areas differently. And when we say that, we try to quantify these perceptions in order to be able to simulate them and provide numerical values in order to integrate that into the design solutions or green design solutions that we provide. I will just touch on one of the projects that we work on in Neom, the city of Neom in KSA, which is a very hot climate. So it has a lot of heat challenges on the users and a lot of air conditioning. High demand of energy is provided there. In this particular project, we used extracts from other fieldwork studies that we provided in Dubai, which is another city in the Gulf region, the UAE. And we used, of course, machine learning tools and other advanced simulations in order to be able to predict the user's behaviors or the user's thermal comfort in this particular context. And then we are now working on providing another active mobility strategy in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is a city that hosted COP27 last year. And it is also of a very hot nature. So when we classify these particular bridging between the different case studies that we work on, we classify them from a climatic perspective purely. So these guidelines we're aiming, it's a new city, and I think some of you might have heard of. It's very ambitious and it has a lot of very high standards in terms of providing green guidelines, yet very challenging, that we had to revisit all of the green standards that are out there, from the LEED, the DMGB, STDAMA, local guidelines and international guidelines as well, to extract how would comfort be able to proceed in order to be able to promote walkability and micromobility, because public transport is one of the high strategies that is required to be decarbonized in that particular area. We worked on that particular project with the mobility experts, and having said that, it's very interesting to, I think this dialogue is ongoing all the time, where the transport sector is a little bit away from the built environment or the buildings where we are able to design and the transport people. So how could we perceive these environments, which are cities, as a holistic approach? So this dialogue was very interesting to the specificity, rather than the data, the specificity of the built environment, which was not there. How much shade is provided, whether there are trees, whether there are no trees, and so on. So it's an early guideline, so these information was not provided. But from a mobility perspective, these particular parts were totally fine to be able to design with and accordingly. Of course, this is one of the areas or cities that is expected to face a lot of heat rise over time, and over the past years it has been very challenging to be able to provide and extend the walkability. So I would say that it was expected to shorten the walkability distance, but we were trying to provide other solutions than providing mechanical cooling in all the outdoor spaces, and these cooling mechanically pockets that are usually, or in many cases, or in many case studies, are provided in cities in the Gulf region mainly, I would say. So the classification of the thermal comfort, we look into it hourly. So we're able to look into this dynamic shifts between each and every space in each and every month, and how these different, of course, categorization of people and users, whether on a bike, whether walking on a scooter, and how this would influence their conduciveness to be able to walk or go to the outdoor environment for most of the year, which is a real challenge. I need to rush, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, I have 2 minutes more.
Okay, please.
So I wouldn't touch more on the parameters of the thermal comfort and how we work on that in terms of extracting the data and integrating it into the simulation tools. But having said that, bringing it back to the bridging between the buildings and the outdoor spaces, we looked into these particular conditions of the mobility units or the stations, whether it's a bus, whether it's a rail station, whether it's just a taxi drop-off or a parking. And we're able to provide or extend the walkability through cooling pocket interventions. So we provided a lot of environmental design guidelines that would enable designers to be able to provide solutions that provide comfort. That is in terms of not only shade, but shade and ventilation, and some of them have dehumidification parameters, as well as mechanical cooling strategies. Some of them provided also new insights for futuristic shading elements that would be able to provide movable, dynamic stops, I would say, or cooling pockets, rather than being only tied to a certain location. So some of these locations did not require continuous cooling throughout the year when the weather conditions do provide good conditions for thermal comfort. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we wish we had more time to go through the slides one by one. It's rich, it's pretty detailed. Maybe we'll look for another forum some other time, maybe online, and then we discuss these issues. Yeah, appears we have plenty rich panelists that have fantastic stories for us to learn from, but it is what it is. Okay, so we'll just take a few minutes. We're already 15 minutes out of our schedule. We'll take a few minutes and a few questions and see if our panelists can. I think one of our panelists wants to drop off or has dropped off, I'm not sure. Okay, so we'll just take a few questions if we have any. Any questions from the House? Okay, it appears people are. Okay, on that note, I'll call on. Okay, we have one question. Dr. MKO, come and have the podium.
Thank you. My question is to Architect Okoye. Actually, I mentioned to him, I'm aware there is neo-urban agenda. I've not seen any conversation around how that affects some of the conversations we are having. This mic is not working. And as a country, I'm also aware that about 3-4 months ago, there was a workshop on the new National Urban Development Plan. How do we integrate some of the concepts of smart and sustainable cities in some of these policy frameworks that has been done? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think really the best way to do that is, I know when we tried to do the one with GIZ, the German and European Union, to develop the handout for the housing, sustainable design of housing, like a manual for implementation. There was a workshop. So it has to come, we have to have workshops, make sure that all the stakeholders are informed. So each person will come with both local and foreign anyway. So we'll come and then look at some case studies. I know that LEAD, you have now an assessment for cities. They've had the one for communities. They've had that one for many years. So you can see some of the considerations. But most of them started from understanding the failures of modernist planning. If you go back to history, people like Le Corbusier, they had this concept, the radius city with some of the modernist ideas that led to some of the public housing that we had in the UK, in the US, which had to be demolished in the 80s and the 90s because we were very unsuccessful. So they've learned. So what they do these days is you have to be empirical, look at things that work. How have people responded to development? And based on that, look for best case studies that are going to implement. One of the first projects I worked on in the US with Wallace Roberts and Todd was the Robert Taylor Homes in Chicago. A site that was about 3 miles long. It had about 20 high-rise buildings, each one about 15 floors. They had to be demolished because that became the crime. It was the center for crime in the US. That was the largest public house in the US, but it became a failure. It's been demolished now. So when we learn from the past, we don't want to make mistakes. Because when you talk of saving energy, when you demolish to rebuild, that's not sustainable. So we need to be able to learn some of these concepts, and then in developing our own, see how we can use the same process they use in developing theirs. Let me just give you a quick example. If you look at the way we've planned housing and public housing in Nigeria, Lekki was planned, and then Irogusa was planned. I mentioned it earlier. Which other place? Awolowo Road. Most of them were residential communities. But over time, they evolved to be, even Victoria Island, they evolved to become commercial. But we've planned some, and we learned that this happened. But when we are still planning, we are still making the same mistakes. We are not looking back to examples of what has happened to inform us about the future. And some of these things, a little literature search, we understand. There's a professor in the University of London, Professor Bill Hillier. He has this book, Cities as Movement Economies. And they've developed what they call the space syntax analysis. The space syntax analysis allows us to understand urban pattern and the most integrated and the least integrated parts of the city and the implication on land uses. So if you use things like that, then you can forecast, looking at a plan, areas that are going to become commercial, areas that are going to not be commercial. For instance, they've done it for, say, Lekki or some of these other developments. We have known that these integrated streets are going to become high streets. So from the planning perspective, you build in the technology infrastructure to cater for those developments. So that is, we have to equip ourselves with current practices, theories, most essentially survey our environment and learn from it to inform us about the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions? Even those online, you can send in your questions by chat. We'll just have 5 minutes. We'll close. Okay, so our distinguished president has a question. Yeah, please. So we'll try and make the answers as brief as possible, and try and make the questions questions, not narratives.
Okay. Very briefly, I think this is to probably Professor Clinton and maybe Nihal. We have a problem with informal settlements in our cities in Africa.
Informal settlements.
Informal settlements with our cities in Africa. In fact, a large proportion of our urban areas are informal settlements. Now, how does this concept of smart and sustainable cities fit with informal settlements? How do you turn an informal settlement into a smart and sustainable place? Is there a solution apart from clearing the urban area and rebuilding, which is a common practice? Thank you.
So I don't know if Dr. Nihal is still online. She can take that question.
Yes.
Okay. Did you get the question clearly?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was expecting to be asked about the integrating the environmental strategies or the green part into the relocated areas, because this is a very big or broad question that would be very challenging to answer straight away. It does not have a direct case study, because as we can see, that governments in many of the developing countries, or if I learn from the cases that are being applied here, so this relocation is quite challenging, as you mentioned. So there are other solutions. I would say some of the case studies that we look into requires case by case. But sometimes the retrofitting strategies are not worth in terms of costs to be able to do that. And the approach has to be purely sustainable. So it's not only the cost that you're looking at, it's the environmental, it's the social, and it's the economical part. Okay. So the economical and the social pillars are very challenging because some of the behaviors of looking into these built environments, having to deplete them and build something from new, sometimes provides that it does not provide a solution, or it provides some behavioral resistance and challenges that we're not able to apply in many of the cases. From an architectural perspective, if we don't look at how complex this process is, from an architect's perspective, I would say that yes, we can provide a lot of retrofitting. It all depends on the infrastructure that's available there. It just depends on the benchmark and the level of deterioration that we want to achieve. So sometimes when this gap is very wide, so it's much easier and it saves a lot of time if we just, we would say that not do the retrofitting, but provide the relocation instead.
Okay.
Because sometimes this intervention takes a lot of time and cost and so on.
Okay, so in a nutshell, there's a social impact you have to worry about, not just the environmental issues that are attached to it. Okay, I think yeah, okay, thank you. So I think Professor Clinton also wants to make a comment on that question.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair. I think the question is very relevant in terms of we have real problems in our communities. I think informal settlement or shanty town, depending on what you call it, is a real phenomenon in the African community. It's South African at the moment. I know the estimate is that informal settlements are created on a daily basis. People just hijack lands and they create their own structures and all that. And within this particular informality, considering the understanding of the informality and formal housing process, because with the informal settlement, it means that they have not basically received by the government to actually benefit from a whole lot of services. But if I use this South African case study, for instance, what the government has been doing over time, there have been a lot of instruments to either kind of upgrade this informal settlement on institute, or basically they create a greenfield project. But if we look at the whole narrative, one of the ideas we've been trying to push in some of our research is that it is time for us to kind of really understand that informal settlements are here to stay with us. It is time for cities to begin to recognize that it is possible to actually integrate them vis-a-vis what we are currently kind of in the former era. So the whole concept of smart cities can actually play, in my view, based on what we have discussed and some of the research we have done, to actually address critical issues in the informal settlement within African communities generally, because you realize that smart cities actually leverage, or smartness kind of really leverage on the digital technologies and is data driven to actually be able to enhance living conditions and other things. So when we must settle it, you realize that these particular smart solutions can actually be used to help us to map, at the same time to understand the dynamics of this community. And it will also be able to help to improve services. It's one of the things that we struggle with in South Africa. Services are not delivered. And also, it can also help us in terms of enhancing infrastructure planning. But the whole first point of call is we need to kind of shift our paradigm to know that we can actually be able to upgrade them and they live within us. So even GIS mapping, satellite imagery, and a whole lot of other aspects like mobile applications, we can also use it to collect data for informal settlement, and that will help for sustainable or good urban planning. And also, considering the actual technology,
somebody close the door.
And we want to look at the other aspect of community engagement. We can also use tools, digital tools, to also get residents' voice, to also hear their voices and all that. So I believe that smart technologies can actually facilitate access to basic services like clean water, which the informal settlement are struggling with, electricity, even waste management in a kind of cost-efficient and effective manner. So essentially, I can say that there are a lot of solutions that we can look at inclusively that can be assessed, considering this particular digital divide, and at the same time, actually able to kind of really create urban rules and laws or bylaws that we actually not eradicate this massive. Because one of the things we also look at with informal settlement eradication of grading is that we disconnect the network of these particular people. And we need to really be truthful to ourselves. Most of these informal settlements are actually created within the peripheries of the big cities, these malls, the suburbs. People work there, they don't stay there, and they need to accept work the next day. That's why so it is more or less to formalize it. There are a lot of instruments to formalize it within South Africa, but the struggle is people see the low income people as a threat, and at the end of the day, you create a whole lot of problems and creative security. But I see it that the smart technology or smart city concept will actually help us to bridge the divide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll have one last question from. Okay, you want to add?
I would just add a case study on the Egypt Green Building Council, where they have provided a tailored guideline extracted out of LEED, of course, and LEED communities and buildings. That's called Tarshid. And then this particular guideline has been, again, that we intend to provide.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll have one last question. Yeah, we'll just take 5 minutes, then we'll close the session. But we've had 2 men ask questions. Let's balance it up.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
So my question could actually go to any of the panelists.
Okay.
My question is, in all of this planning, how do we integrate this into our building code, and how often should we be reviewing it? I mean, based on what has been designed, there is code for that the city is being aligned to, which I believe the building also should align to a particular code that have bet the various examples that we've been given. So how often are these codes being reviewed, and how are they implemented into city planning, knowing that various cities have their peculiarities, even in the same country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if you got the question.
Yes. Can I give
Oh.
it a try?
Okay, please. You have the floor.
Yeah. I think this was the whole essence of my presentation, looking at standards, because it's not just about talking about retrofitting, smart cities, smart infrastructure. It's like we kind of jumped into the technologies and looking at the fanciness or what it can do. But the question is, are they incorporated into a particular system? Let's say, do we have standards which basically automatically become the building codes to say how we want it to be done and all that? So our question is very relevant, and is what I try to tease out in my speech, because incorporating smart city planning, smart city concepts into building code will require a very careful balance between looking at the existing regulations and at the same time the introduction of these particular new regulations, so that we can actually be able to support a holistic integration of digital technologies, which is the smart aspects, and sustainable practices. We need to look at that carefully, meaning that in updating the building codes, we need to look at what we're currently doing and what are we moving away from, how are we improving the system in terms of requirement for energy efficiency, for instance. Something that is very dear to my heart, which we don't pay attention to. If I pick Nigeria, for instance, we have a lot of retrofitted houses with PVs. You have solar panels, you have inverters, and most people have solar panels connected to your battery system. If we look at the smartness of the house within a particular neighborhood alone, you realize that I'm sure you can actually be able to get over 40 kVA within a particular neighborhood. But something we are not careful with is that the storage aspect, don't forget you always have excess in terms of the generating power during the day. It's possible for us to actually be able to look at an energy efficiency platform where not everybody needs to have that particular storage and PVA, but we can actually be able to come up with gadgets and bylaws where some people that don't afford it, we're actually able to sell to them. It's very possible. They also need to look at how do we incorporate flexibility, because there needs to be flexibility with building codes, which will now allow for technological advancement. And we need to achieve this through a performance-based code. We need to look at what is performing and what is not performing. And also, even looking at the aspect of smart infrastructure requirements to say what actually do we really need for smart infrastructure requirements. Building codes can then basically help us to let us know what should be included as part of the smart infrastructure in terms of are we going to look at intelligent transport systems? Are we going to incorporate it with smart grid, with IoT devices, and much more? The other thing we need to look at then, which is not really coming up at the moment, is aspect of digital standards. To say, okay, building codes needs to incorporate standards that are related to digital technology, like BI and data security. So we need to start thinking about digital standards. However, within all this particular dimension, we then need to look at participation within the professional bodies, the public participation, and then the main aspect which we need to focus on is our educational institutions. We need trade and education. We need to ensure that these new codes are implemented effectively, because we can't be talking about codes in this room, whereas those of us teaching in the classroom, we are still teaching British standard of 1960. You realize that we are actually not moving forward. Architect needs to basically be enlightened in terms of how we design. The engineer and the builder, the qualities of everybody working in this particular area, so that at the end of the day, even down to the inspectors or the civil engineers, actually understand the rationale behind what the code is and how to comply with them. So her question is very something that I can go on and on. So it's the whole essence to say standards are needed, and we need to be intentional and deliberate and kind of really do it considering where we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have two other questions, but I would appeal that those questions are answered on the platform so we can share them later because we have to close now. Two questions. One, somebody wanted a comparative analysis of EDGE and the lead standards. Somebody else wanted an analysis of what is the relevance of peer review compared to regulation in driving change in this industry. So I think we can answer those questions on the platform, and then we'll look for another fora to share it with everybody else. So on that note, I just want to say a very big thank you for all of you for taking our time to put together these rich slides, fantastic presentations, even though we don't have enough time to go through them at the pace we would have loved to. We appreciate you. We thank you very much for taking our questions. We'll keep having these kind of sessions from time to time, maybe some virtual. So thank you very much, but we'll be coming back to you for some more time, some more knowledge, and some more insight. Thank you very much, and God bless. So we'll now have the other people joining us so that we can have a bigger session. Thank you very much, our panelists. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Maybe just give a minute to our other participants. I'm just there to take the vote of thanks, and I think it will be good for them to be here. All right, I think they will join us. So once again, good evening, distinguished guests, our esteemed speakers, panelists, delegates, gentlemen of the press, and everyone in the room and outside the room as well. To our virtual audience as well, I say very good evening to you. On behalf of the Green Building Council of Nigeria and our various partners and sponsors, I want to express our immense gratitude and pleasure as we conclude this highly successful and Future City Summit. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible. On behalf of the organizing committee, I extend my heartfelt vote of thanks to each and every one of us for making this event a very successful and enriching experience. First and foremost, I would like to express our appreciation to our partners, IFC, our sponsors, Dangote, Coca-Cola, and a host of them that are listed here. I say a very big thank you to our various volunteers, moderators of various sessions, to all the participants that made the session worthwhile for us to, learn and unlearn, share experience, give us action points and things to take home. I say a very big thank you. As we look forward to the past few days, we can't help but marvel at the wealth of knowledge shared and the bonds we've formed. This summit has undoubtedly laid the groundwork for future collaboration and advancement in our respective fields, which I believe the various sessions we had, from waste to water, to funding, to materials, to architecture, to planning, I think it's been very, very enriching. And I say a very big thank you for our various robust contribution. The conversation is still ongoing, and we look forward to hear from you all. The site will be up. Please feel free to send us feedback. We also share the QR code where you can actually send your feedback to us. Please feel free to reach out. And sincere appreciation to our various volunteers as well that have been up and about, sending us email, arranging the all moderating sessions, making us comfortable. And those of our participants that have also traveled from various parts of the country, we say a very big thank you. And I wish you safe travels to your various destinations. Thank you and good evening.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. I'm sure we're all tired, and thank you so much for that very eloquent and comprehensive vote of thanks. You've covered everything. I don't really need to say anything more, but I've been dragooned here, so one or two sentences. The first thing I want to say is that it is obvious that we have only scratched the surface of these issues. These issues that we've discussed over the past 2 days are of huge relevance to our country and indeed Africa in general when we, within the context of decarbonization and urban resilience. But from the passion, from the energy that we have seen, we notice that we really have to dive deeper into these issues. So I just want to tell you that we plan that over the course of the next few months, we're going to continue exploring these issues through a series of workshops and seminars. So keep your eyes on our social media pages. We know that some of your questions are not yet answered. Some of the issues that ought to have been discussed have not been touched upon or have not been fully addressed. We have not been able to dig deep enough. So we'll be organizing a series of sessions and exploring these issues in greater depth over the next few months. So watch out for that. The second takeaway for me, anyway, I'm talking about me, I don't know about you, is that this work is huge. It is immense. And so GBCN is putting out this call now. I know our director of membership spoke to you about signing up and how to sign up and the benefits of membership. I just want to tell you that the work is huge and we know that we need help. We know that we can't do it, so we encourage you. We thank you for coming here, especially our partners from the public sector, from the private sector, from the academic sector, from the professional sector. We are all gathered here together, and the media. So please, we recognize that because of the immensity of this task ahead of us, we need to come together. No single one of us can accomplish it alone. So please let us continue to work together. We promise that we will continue to engage with you one-on-one even after this. I think let me wrap up there. We're all tired and we need to go. Thank you so much, and goodbye and good night and safe travels.